Land's Lone Show, and so much to talk about and break down today. And I'm very happy to have returning to the show retired U.S. Air Force Lieutenant Colonel Karen Kwiatkowski. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great.
Now, I want to also mention that you are with the Eisenhower Media Network, LouRockwell.com, and your Substack, KarenKwiatkowski.substack.com. So make sure you're checking out her work and her articles, which is what we're actually talking about first today. Your most recent article, which is Planning for the Future, is the headline. And really, kind of the question why I wanted to tackle from this is you have a really interesting line in this article that I think is very accurate, but I want you to maybe expand on a little bit more because to some people it might seem counterintuitive. You write, Israel, as U.S. Pt.COL overlord, is busy creating its own mini empire, extending its will and Washington's in service to Western values. And, you go on to point out how these Western values, it's all hypocritical, but a lot of people will look at the situation with Israel and say it doesn't make sense that a country so dependent on Washington, so dependent on American aid, which, is apparently by their own, maybe just paranoia, but what they constantly say, in the middle of a lot of enemies. And so they're in desperate need of the U.S. And yet they get to do what they want, and they're kind of the overlords. And so how does this dynamic work?
Well, I don't know exactly how it works, but the if you look at what some of the leaders of Israel have said in the past and the way they talk about the United States, they don't. They like what we give them, but they feel that they have a great deal of power. They themselves presume, assert, uh, are very confident that they have a great deal of power over Washington. So that may be the starting point. Why do they think that they have so much power over Washington? Well, they have, there's APAC. There is a huge array of other Israeli U.S. Relationships and places that they can bring their influence to bear. And then, of course, there's Mossad and things like Epstein's Island, and the whole idea of blackmail, the use of blackmail to get things that you want from either businessmen or politicians. So there's a whole array of ways that Israel can, and if you listen to their own words, we have to presume that they are they're using all these ways to get what they want from the United States. So in that respect, and they're very confident about that. They don't seem worried yet. Anyway, they don't seem worried that the U.S. is going to suddenly uh, assert its own nationalism and say no, this is not good for America. We're not doing it. No, the continued aid to Israel is not worth it. We're not doing it. They don't fear that that's going to happen anytime soon. So they're very confident. And I trust their confidence. I trust that that confidence is not misplaced, really, which is sad for Americans because we think that we run our country. But in terms of foreign policy, pretty sure, uh, for the most part, Israel is at least as important as any voter. In fact, it's probably 100,000 times more important than any voter or any state for that matter.
Probably right about that. It seems, somebody once said if all the citizens of Israel were moved to the state of Florida, then Israel would only have two senators rather than, probably the 75 that they currently have. And let's hear from one of the, I guess, favorite Israeli senators, Lindsey Graham.
I've been trying to help him every way I can. Sometimes we disagree, but I think he's been great. I just think the man has taken the bull by the horns. How he gets up every morning, I don't know. They try to beat him up from the time he goes to the bed, and, he's just an amazing guy, and Israel's never had a better friend. And so I'm in a primary. Help me if you can. Somebody's, why do you go to Israel so much? Name one person that wants to kill the Israel that doesn't want to kill us. Aren't you glad they're fighting the fight over there? Everybody they're killing over there is one less guy to get here. Common values, common enemies, and this is my foreign policy when it comes to Israel. God blesses those who bless Israel. So, That's why I go.
So this is something we're hearing time and time again from senators. This is something that Ted Cruz said to Tucker Carlson. It got a lot of attention. How is it that we could have senators who seem to prioritize a foreign government over our own?
Yeah, I mean that's it's. I think that if you want to put that in perspective, think of any other country that has such a legion of advocates in our government, both the Senate and the House, and among lobbyists, among our past presidents. You know, if you put another country that had 9 million people in it, and you talked about it as often as our Congress does, and you thought it was that great, and you would do anything for it, that would be sus. Okay, that would be very suspicious. People would not buy it. They would find it to be weird and strange. But Israel gets this special treatment, and of course, none of what Lindsey Graham says is ever true, really. I mean, I don't think the man's ever said an honest word, but his perspective that we're fighting the same war, okay, that the enemies of Israel are the same as the enemies of the United States. I think the United States would have hardly any enemies if it wasn't for Israel. Certainly not in the global South. We would have none. The Israel actually has created massive, massive problems for the United States. And this isn't even counting the problems it creates on purpose for the United States, interference with our government, I hate to say false flags, but Israel has a fair share of basically nothing's off the table when Israel needs to make a point or to rally the American population against its enemies. But those enemies are not American enemies. And, in fact, even historically, we took out Iraq. But, we were allied with Iraq until right before they invaded Kuwait. We were allied with them. So, I mean, this whole thing, is just, you know, none of it makes very much sense. And so I wouldn't take the word of a guy like Lindsey Graham, although he makes the point that other people are fighting and dying for our values. That's kind of what I was making the point. And certainly we've heard him say the exact same thing with regards to Ukraine. That Ukrainians are killing Russians, and isn't that a wonderful thing that we don't have to? Anyway,
About war, seemingly no matter what war it is. Now, I kind of want tie that back to your article where you do point out and go on at length how we're told that this is all about our support for Israel is based on these Christian values, and really, as you say, there's a genocide going on in Gaza, and so. What do you think? Are these our values that we share with Israel? Is it our national security that we share with Israel? Or is it really just our elected leaders who seem to, allow themselves to be beholden to a foreign government?
Yeah, well, the fact that they're beholden to them is a problem in itself. But even if you are friends or allies, even if you're personal friends, even if you believe, evangelical type view that we must support Israel, even if we don't like them, even if you do all those things, you feel that way, you love Israel, you can't possibly support the genocide that's going on. And I don't care if you call it a genocide or ethnic cleansing or just, kind of a lopsided battle, a trained military against basically unarmed civilians for over 600 days now. But, in the blockades of food and medicine, these kinds of things. If you ask Americans whether politicians are actual just regular Americans, we don't support that. Nobody supports that. And if a politician or a person supports that, then they are an evildoer. Okay, they are violating the whatever moral code that we like to associate with Western values. So certainly Christianity, it's a violation of a Christian moral code. I think it's actually a violation of Jewish moral code. I know some Israelis believe they must kill them to the last child. They must be completely exterminated. But Jewish scholars, most Jews don't agree with that. I don't think around the world, certainly they don't. So there's being friends with a country which is an alliance which is already, problematic. But then there's accepting evil and being a party to it, being a part of it, supporting it, accepting it, tolerating it, hiding it. That's what our politicians are doing. That's what Donald Trump is doing. I had some hopes for Donald Trump uh, in some of the things. I saw him as a change agent. I saw him as a disruptor, and he hasn't disrupted very much at all. He's basically Biden part two. He doesn't use it. He doesn't need the auto pen because he's competent, but he's really not morally competent. He's not doing the right thing here. I mean, if you had to pick, if you are the most powerful man in the world, as the American president is often described, and Trump believes that he is that person. He believes that he is that person. And if you believe that and you don't stop a genocide, which has absolutely no strategic value for Israel, and actually is harming Israel in a strategic way, that's what that genocide is doing. So if you love Israel, and I don't. I love America, and that's it. If you love Israel and you see Israel as a useful ally, and you care about Israel's leaders, as Trump says that he does, and you allow Israel to continue to do what they're doing, exterminating people, torturing people, starving people, um, depriving them of medical aid, bombing hospitals, schools, killing journalists, just on a daily basis, you're routinizing that. If you're supporting that, that's killing Israel, by the way. This, you think, who cheered when Iranian ballistic missiles hit their targets in Israel? The whole world cheered. Okay, that's because of Gaza. Israel might have got away with having a little more popular support in the world if it wasn't murdering the Gazans, okay, for no real reason. Honestly, this October 7th was very much a lax security, if not something that was allowed to happen. The comparison to 9/11 is brought up by the Israelis. This is our 9/11, and it does compare in some ways to 9/11 in that it was allowed to happen, in the sense that the normal security procedures that would have been in place on that day, on any other day of the year, in that location, were not there. Um, so in that respect, it's like a 9/11. But so that's their excuse. But what they're doing is ruining their global position, and I don't think it's able to be fixed. The younger generation of people, you've got people that like Israel that might be in America, let's say, in over 50, over 60, conservatives perhaps, pro-Israeli. We have a long history of a habit, I should say, of liking and respecting Israel and thinking of Israel as good for America. The younger generation doesn't have that. Okay, first of all, they don't learn history. They don't remember anything. 9/11 is very vague to them. Um, what they know is very different, and they are being allowed, unlike we at that age, they're being allowed to see this in real time and to talk about it in a global community, because that's the way the internet is, and you can't really stop that. You don't want to, of course. The governments want to, but we don't want to. This is good. We're communicating, and they're forming. I would say 65% of the global population has already formed an opinion of Israel that will not change. It's a formative uh, shift in their attitude towards that country, and it's the end. It truly foretells the end of the Zionist state, for sure. Now, if you cared about the Zionist state, and you're an American who cares about it, or you're a Donald Trump who is friends with Bibi Netanyahu, and you want good things for Israel, then you would have solved Gaza immediately. If you were the most powerful man in the world, you would have stopped it. And how would you have stopped it? Well, we're paying for it. It's our bombs that are being dropped. It's our F-35s or their F-35s that we're maintaining. So you just stop all that, and it ends. And then you use your other powers to pressure Israel to see the light here. But that didn't happen, and that's not happening yet. So then I have to say, well, Donald Trump, you're a war criminal, because you're enabling. If we had a member of our family, like a cousin, okay, and he happened to be a murderer, he liked to go and do bad things, and we enabled that. We drove him to and from his target locations, perhaps. Maybe we hit him when the cops came. We lied. We are abetting the crime. We're guilty as he is. So Trump is as guilty as Netanyahu in this, and I don't know why he doesn't see this, but and I'm not inside of his head, but it's very evil, is what it is. And so, in that respect, Trump has been a major disappointment. Now, I said the same thing about Biden, but Biden had the excuse of being senile. And so the people making the decisions around Biden were Zionists, and
Mhm.
not very smart ones, because obviously murdering the Gazans, the equivalent of 8 atomic bombs dropped on a tiny little piece of property, destroying Gaza, for destroying every building, every industrial function, all of that. That does not help Israel. Um, Israel, even if they took over Gaza because they had eliminated every Gazan, that doesn't help Israel. The cost of doing that is far more expensive than the benefit of what they're, even the most avid Zionist is trying to do here. They're making a strategic mistake, a political mistake, but also a strategic mistake. And if you were friends with Israel, you would make sure they didn't do that. What do we tell people when they're with friends who are getting ready to make a really bad decision, or do something that's going to cost them their life? Well,
Mhm.
driving, for example, what do we do? What do we say? We take the keys, right? We say, no,
Right.
you sleep on the couch tonight. You're not safe to drive. That's what we say to a friend. So we're not friends with Israel, because if we were, we would have stopped this a long time ago. And I understand Biden. Biden is evil. I have no sympathy for him, but he wasn't running the government. He was allowing government to be
Right.
run by the his appointees, and all of his top people were Zionists, and so not very smart ones, of course, because if you truly believed in Zionism, you would not be doing this. They are hurting themselves every day. They continue to do it, and I think they've passed the point of no return. Even if they stopped uh, you know, stopped shooting, withdrew, allowed the whole world to come in and feed the remaining Gazans and to rebuild or whatever. Even if they did that now, I think most of the planet has already made up their mind. And that is that they're not buying from Israel. They don't respect Israel. They hate Israel, many of them. Uh, they're not going to put up with it. They don't believe anything that they say, and they wish it was completely disarmed. Or, as we saw with the 12 so-called 12-day war, they will cheer when Israel is harmed in the future. Uh, I wouldn't want to be an Israeli right now. I wouldn't want to be a Zionist, having gone down this path. And President Trump should be fixing that, but he didn't. He chose not to do that. So, what good is he?
Well, I agree with a lot of what you said there. Now, I do want to move on and talk about who else is influencing Trump. I found this very interesting article from Responsible Statecraft, how the weapons industry pushed Trump towards war with Iran. And the author explains, according to a lengthy report by the New York Times, President Trump's decision on June 22nd to authorize airstrikes at Iranian nuclear sites was influenced in part by Fox News. For days, Trump was fed a steady diet of pro-war personalities on the cable channels, such as Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, exiled Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi, and hardline anti-Iranian congressional hawks like Lindsey Graham. However, according to an analysis from Responsible Statecraft, many other Fox guests were funded by the defense industry, which absolutely stood to gain from the shift to hot war between Israel and the US and Iran. One by one, these guests lined up on the White House's TV screens to praise Israel's strikes and urge further U.S. involvement. So, my questions to you are: do you think Fox News really has this much influence? And if they do, how terrifying of news is this?
Yeah. Well, Washington itself is not uh, the world that Washington exists in and sees is not the real world. Um, they are uh, responding to the forces that run that city, which are lobbyists. It's where the money goes, and how they ensure the money continues to go. And so a big part of that is the defense industry. Um, you know, this kind of a war, this 12, it could have been a lot longer than 12 days or whatever, but the way Israel consumes weapons, and of course the way Ukraine consumes weapons also, is wonderful, whether they win or lose. It's absolutely wonderful for an American defense industry because we provide most of that stuff. And now we have an artificial demand that's been created for what they alone can provide. And since they do it via government contracts, it's very wasteful. It's very expensive. We've gotten ourselves in this mode of production of our military defense items. It has evolved into a very few companies that do the work and they deliver for the work that they do is to deliver us very, very expensive, often single-use type weapons with a very long and expensive logistics tail. So the whole defense industry in the United States has, whether it was designed this way or it evolved this way. I mean, this is what Eisenhower warned about. That the defense industry itself would shape the way we did defense. And of course, when I say defense, I really mean offense, because none of the stuff that they're selling the U.S. government does anything for defense. Do we have a air defense system in the United States? No. Trump has a point. I want a golden dome or an iron dome, whatever he wants. Well, that's totally inappropriate for us. We don't need that. But the fact that we don't have a defensive system in this country, we have extremely porous borders. We have everything that we do is organized around offense, and these offensive weapons are expensive and profitable. So in that world of Washington, that's all they're talking to. They're talking to people that want to make profit, who then donate to campaigns, who fund entire media organizations like Fox News, but the others as well. This is their little. It's a self-licking ice cream cone. This is what they're dealing with. So, if you don't have people in Congress like Thomas Massie, who is invested in Kentucky. He's invested in the 4th District of Kentucky. He lives there. He is connected to those people. But most congressmen, they ignore their constituents. Only the ones that call them every day. Only their APAC minder who calls them once a week. They know that one. They listen to that one. But the average person who is working and living their life, they're not on the phone to their congressman. They're not donating to their congressman every time he asks for money. Those guys have no voice. And those congressmen and women are not listening to them. So it's not just that the defense industry has great leverage here, but our Congress is extremely weak in the sense of it only hears those loudest voices, and the main way of communicating is money. So the defense industry has them by the short hairs. This is how it's been for some time, and it's how it is now. And what we have then is that to me is the real problem. And of course, we saw the DOGE, right? The government efficiency officer, whatever. We saw that they could do a little bit with USAID, and they could do a little bit here and there, and then maybe they're looking at Social Security and false Social Security numbers. But one thing they're not looking at all, and I don't think anybody can say that they are, is the Pentagon. And yet that's where they should be looking. That's where there is wonderful wealth to be conserved, taxpayer wealth. There's wonderful defense that might be pursued, actual defense, but we're not doing any of that. We have an offensive Pentagon. It's filled with, generals that are looking for their next job in the defense industry, the revolving door. It's really a problem. And Trump, again, I accused him of not solving his friend Israel's problem. Zionist Israel has a huge problem, and they've stepped into a terrible hole with Gaza, with what they've done, because it cannot be repaired. Their reputation will never recover. In our lifetimes and in the lifetimes of people that are in their 20s, it will never recover. I think it's the death knell for Zionism. Trump did nothing about that, okay? And he's also done nothing to solve the problem that Americans face, and that is we don't have defense in this country. We have a very politicized offense, a very expensive offense, and it controls Congress. We don't. So, that would have been a nice problem that a most powerful man in the world could have addressed a little bit. Maybe he could have shined some light on that, but he doesn't do that. He listens to beautiful faces on Fox News and slick people that wear nice suits. He likes that, and it's very unfortunate because we can all look pretty and wear a nice suit, right? I mean, if that's what it takes to, and if we care about making the president do something we want, we know how to play that game. Look at little Zelensky. He took off his little sweatshirt. He put a nice suit on. It's a game. Trump should be, they say he plays like, they say like, oh, he has a plan. No, he doesn't have a plan. He's like a ball that bounces in a machine. This hits him, he goes one way, he goes another way, and he doesn't even have what most of us do have, and that is a sense of who can you believe and who can't you believe. We have that, at our age, and Trump's way older than you. He's older than me. He should have a very good sense of who he can believe and who he can't, and yet he doesn't. So Lindsey Graham, that is a flawed individual, morally, politically, in every way, a flawed individual who should not be believed. You should not get your data from Lindsey Graham. He should know this. Most of the Fox News or any of the news people, they are not experts in what they do. They read news that is produced by people who may or may not be experts. Most of them are not experts either. But these guys are not people that you should take. They're not people you should trust. There's plenty of people. In fact, remember Major Colonel Davis, Lieutenant Colonel Davis?
Yes.
Who he's a great guy that Trump should listen to. And he's not a libertarian. He is not a libertarian. He's a realist, of course, and he has tons of experience. Tulsi wanted to put him on the National Security Council, and that was shot down because he is objective about Israel, not critical, objective, honest. Mm-hmm. And so they shot that down. So, if you're president, you're the most powerful man in the world. Can't you get outside of your office and go find somebody to talk to if you really cared? If you really cared about understanding how you can really solve serious problems? Because Trump said, he has said for a long time, he wants to solve these serious problems. And he thinks that he needs to consolidate his power and be outlandish or whatever he's got to do to solve these problems. But in fact, he hadn't solved any problems. And he's not even trying to listen to people that could help him solve these problems. So basically, it's like Tom Woods said, whoever, it doesn't matter who you vote for, you always get John McCain.
Yeah, that's right. And yeah, I really wish, even if he's just going to watch things, maybe scroll on over to YouTube and watch some Judge Napolitano, where I know you're a frequent guest, or like the brilliant Jeffrey Statz or John Mearsheimer, people who could provide him with real information and analysis, and not just Lindsey Graham. Now, before I get to this next clip, I just want to mention we have a very active chat right now going on YouTube. Lt.COL Colonel Karen, they absolutely love you and your analysis. So if you're watching live, head on over to the chat, subscribe to the channel, let us know what you think. If you're just watching on Nets, again, repost, help us out there. Now, I do have a clip for you to play, Nets. This is the Mossad chief discussing about how much help they get from the CIA.
I also want to express appreciation and gratitude to our main partner, the CIA, for the joint operations and the missions that were carried out. And also to the head of the CIA, who supported the Mossad in making the right decisions, which ultimately made this operation possible. We will continue to keep a very close watch on all the projects in Iran, which we know in the most thorough way, and we will be there just as we have been until now. But we must not forget that there are still 50 hostages in the Gaza Strip. 30 deceased, 20 living hostages, whom it is our moral and ethical duty to bring back to our border. I want to thank you all again, and to tell you that you are part of history. An unforgettable and inseparable part of what the Mossad has done and continues to do. Continue working shoulder to shoulder with our partners in the IDF and the Shin Bet, and in this way, we will keep bringing great achievements to the people of Israel. So thank you all very much. Well done, truly well done.
So I thought one of the really important things there was Mossad and the CIA talking about the relationship. And as Matt Blumenthal observed on Twitter, CIA Ratcliffe, the director there, was one of the people feeding Donald Trump this narrative that there was only 15 days before Iran was going to get a bomb, an assessment that apparently came from Israel. And he also notes that it was Susie Wiles, Trump's chief of staff, who was keeping Ratcliffe as the main advisor to Trump on this. And Susie Wiles previously ran Netanyahu's re-election campaign in 2020.
Yeah.
And so, boy, I don't want to
Kind of
think that my government is run by a foreign country, but there seems to be a lot of evidence to make that case at this
Yeah,
point in
that's
time.
interesting about Susie Wiles, because I know when she's the first female presidential chief of staff, which is Trump made a. I mean, had always appointed a lot of uh, females. I think more so than some other folks. But Susie Wiles, she wasn't the typical Trump female appointee. She didn't have the long blonde hair. Looked like she was stepping off a runway. She's a middle-aged woman, just normal looking person. So I wondered, he's been working with her for a while, but I wondered why she was so important, why she needed to be there. And now we know. Now we know. Yeah, our government is not our government. That's for sure. There's a debate. There's an argument. What is the tail and what's the dog, right? Are we, a lot of the world sees us using Israel to expand, extend, maintain our empire in the Middle East and beyond. And it is very well known that the CIA can only do certain things constitutionally. Not that they don't lie, cheat, and steal. They do that. I think Pompeo verified that for us. But the we allied intelligence agencies, whether they are Mossad or Shin Bet, the domestic intelligence service, they can do things in our country that then they can share with our government. And we have done that with a lot of, the Five Eyes countries. There's a lot of sharing that goes along. And some of that sharing, a good much of it, has to do with those countries who are our friends doing intelligence work inside our country that our government is prohibited from doing by law. But it's not prohibited from sharing when another country does it. So we turn a blind eye to domestic spying by England or Australia or Israel, who's not a Five Eye, but Israel certainly does a lot of work domestically. And so are we using, is our government in Washington really so power hungry and so disconnected from the people that we're using Israel to maintain and extend our own empire? And I think there's a lot to be said for that. That's certainly Brian Berletic's view, that Israel's not using us, we're using Israel. But when you look at how it operates, there seems to be a lot of evidence that Israel uses us. And again, when you listen to Israelis and you listen to or read the translated Hebrew, not what they say in English, because if they're saying it in English, they're messaging to the United States, they're messaging to Americans. But what they talk about to themselves in Hebrew is an attitude that they are the dog that wags our tail. They are the leaders in the situation. They are the commanders. So, yeah, I don't know which is most correct. And I the relationship is it's very sick anyway, either way. If they can't even be honest about who's in charge or what, because constitutionally, our government, even if it doesn't take the advice of George Washington or Jefferson, we don't want entangling alliances. We'll be friends to all. Even if they don't want to take that advice, there are legal constraints on how we have relations with other countries, and it's called treaties. And we don't have any treaty with Israel. We don't have a mutual defense pact with Israel. I mean, this is the so weird thing about Trump and his 12-day war and his use of the B-2s. And apparently that B-2 flight against Fordow, of course it's the plot of Top Gun, the latest Top Gun movie, Maverick. But there was an article I saw a couple days ago or very recently talking about the planning of that, and the design of those bunker busters was around Fordow. It was around the very target in Iran. So we built a weapon. Now, how's that for defense? We build a weapon around a very particular target halfway around the world that does not threaten us, that cannot,
Hmm.
and actually doesn't threaten Israel. There's a bomb there, maybe potentially in the future, but this is seen as defense. That's not defense. That's offense. That is feeding the military-industrial complex in this country, and Israel is very interested in doing that because also who paid for all those bombs? Who paid for that big 37-hour round trip with those 7 B-2s and the 14 bunker busters they let go? Who paid for that? Who do you think paid for that? We all paid. Americans paid for that. Israel didn't pay for it, and they don't pay for most of what effectively what they're using in Gaza, what they use against Lebanon, what they use to destroy Syria's defense. So if I've had to place my bets on it, if we're using Israel, we're doing a really really bad job of it. I think Israel's using us because they're making bank on it. We're not. We make nothing. In fact, it's like Thomas Massey said, and I mentioned it in that article in his interview with uh, Ray Vaughn, whatever the guy's name is, Theo Vaughn.
Yeah.
Did a little podcast, and he said, "What do we get out of our relationship with Israel?" And it was really we get more and more people that hate America. That's what we get from that relationship. So we're not making bank off the relationship. Israel is, even though strategically Israel is in a bad place. They have made, I think, I'm not going to say their last mistake, but what this 12-day war showed was Israel can be hit, it can be harmed. They have to lie about it. We lied about it for them on their behalf. But the fact is, the Israelis, it's almost a self-fulfilling prophecy. They believe everyone hates them, and then they got hit. So that kind of proved the point that everyone hates them. But why would you want to live in Israel? If you're a Jewish person, why would you want to do that? If you're a Zionist, you got to feel pretty bad that you're at least as badly hated as you were in 1948 when you were doing the first Nopka. Has anything changed? Are you more tolerated? And Trump's like, oh, the Abraham Accords. Okay, not a treaty. Okay, just words on paper with a bunch of people that we have debased, that we don't respect, that we sell arms to, extremely high markup arms, right? I mean, that's where the profit is. You get an Arab country that's led by, and these countries don't even have a lot of Arabs in them. These are small, tiny countries. So what are we getting? The military industrial complex can sell arms. They can use them up and create demand. But for the most part, we get nothing from it. And increasingly, Israel is getting nothing for it. They have been our support, our blind, immoral, and apparently we can't change it. This support that comes out of Washington for Israel has actually empowered it to make incredible mistake after incredible mistake. And at some point, this comes due. At some point, this debases your own country. And the very fact that when they were started to be hit on the 12-day war and the ballistic missiles the Iron Dome was weakening, more things were getting through, buildings were being hit in Tel Aviv. What did Israel do? They said, nobody can leave. What insanity is that? I mean, they have no self-awareness of how do you think the rest of the world, who's already predisposed not to like Israel, and then they see, and then they got pictures of their bunkers that people go in, but they wouldn't let any of their Taiwanese, or not Taiwanese, their various South
Palestinian,
import workers. Of course, it goes without saying, any Palestinian workers. Only Jews could go in, and we have the internet to tell us. We see these things. People are posting how it looks, and so Israel will not recover from this, and we are going to be punished by our connection and blind support of Israel. So, I would love it if both Washington and the Zionist government both imploded. I don't mean that in a kinetic sense, but politically,
right?
Because bad decision after bad decision, and for the MAGA voters, what are we getting? We got a big beautiful bill that raises our debt and deficit, and Trump says, "Oh, we're going to grow our way." Trump says we're going to grow our way out of debt. Has he been to Middle America? Has he been outside of Washington recently? Don't go to a rally and have a bunch of people screaming at you and cheering. Go downtown somewhere in these across the country. Talk to regular people who are not able to make ends meet, that look at the infrastructure falling apart.
Yep.
And he thinks we're going to grow our way out of it. That's insanity. I mean, I'm not saying it's potentially true. We could, but not in the condition that we are at. That's like looking at a guy on his deathbed, an economy on its deathbed, a financialized economy that produces very, very little of concrete value. Most of our financialized economy, most of our service economy, if the AI revolution even gets partly to where it will get to, is going to slash those jobs. We won't need those jobs. So, and Trump is so out of touch that he thinks we can grow our way out of it. No, and that's not what he promised to do. I think he promised to do something very different. So again, we got lied to. The MAGA people who had hope that this guy will be different. Very sad. Very sad.
Yes, and Lieutenant Colonel Karen, I wish I could let you go on, but we have to wrap it up there. This was absolutely fantastic. Definitely the most lively chat we have had so far on the show. I think over 1,000 people watching live now. So I really appreciate your time. And everybody, make sure you check out her articles, LouRockwell.com. They're on Substack, KarenKwiatkowski.substack.com. And of course, everything the Eisenhower Media Network does. Great people over there. So thank you, and I hope you'll return to the show again.
Oh, absolutely. Thanks a lot for having me.